Prior to having YouTube and Instagram and all these social media outlets where people can share information and pass things around, we had stuff like this. This is issue number 108, May 1997 of Fine Home Building magazine. I was all of 9 months old when this came out. Funny enough, I've talked to the guy Mike on the front cover here quite a few times. Super intelligent carpenter, amazing with teaching, couldn't ask for a better connection. And that's what I think is cool. Back then, this magazine came out, maybe a few people had talked to Mike, but not that many. But with the internet, social media, and everything we've got today, we're able to connect with these people, and I can share information with you, Mike can share information with you, and our guest today can share information with you. And I think that's pretty cool. Today we're going up to Washington to go visit a friend of mine that builds a little bit different than most. Some things can be a little bit controversial. The way that he does things might not work for all, but they work for him. So I'm packing my bags and flying to Washington to talk to him about how he builds in Washington versus how we build in California. Things are a lot different. And we're gonna get into all that and more. You guys may or may not know who I'm talking about, but he's been a great friend over the years. He's helped me out with a ton of different things, and I'm happy to be able to talk to him in person. Links for him are in the description down below. Let's head out. So I'm standing at one of Tim Mueller's projects, Awesome Framers. Links for all of them are in the description down below. And I want to take you guys through the steps of the building process here. The wall assembly specifically, the R-Sheathing that he's got on here, it's not something that we've used in California, so it's not something you guys have seen on my channel, but I want to have him explain that to you, kind of talk about the thermal bridging and things like that, give you a little bit better understanding. Along with that, we're going to run through and talk about 16 on center versus 24 on center, because I think that's an interesting topic. I would never have a stud bay like this. Tim's going to explain why he does it and more.
So this panel here is just the zip panel. You know, people are going to look at this and go, why are you using zip inside the house? The reason is this is the 7/16 panel, but it's bonded to the 1-inch polyiso. So it's a continuous insulation product with the structural panel on the outside. So that's why, since this is technically an outside wall, but inside the house, right? It'll be protected by a roof. But the garage isn't really going to be insulated. We've got a giant door there, so what kind of insulated value do you get? So this is just reducing thermal bridging. You know, everywhere that we have a stud, that's like R5.5 or something. With the 6, now we're R11. I think the illustration everybody uses is we put continuous insulation on, the same reason why we put on a coat when we're cold. So you can see it here. I'm still trying to find a good router bit to use with the stand-up router, but that's 1-inch polyiso and there's the wood structural panel. And so in order for us to get our shear value, we're using a 3-inch nail.
What are you doing as far as doors go? Because this obviously makes your jamb thicker.
It's just extension jams.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good question. It is actually, I'm surprised this is all saturated, but it's drying out. So we'll tape the sill, just like normal. Nothing really changes for us as far as detailing. It's just like we've installed a thicker panel. So if you're 7/16 and all of a sudden the engineer's like, I want an 1.5-inch panel, then of course longer nail. So then like this wall, I had them run it in. When you do layout, you have to adjust layout a little bit because of that thickness. So like your normal California corners don't really work. So on this side, you have a 5.5-inch cavity plus the 1.5 inch of foam out there. So you got to slide your stud over for your backing. And that kind of changes a little bit depending on how you configure the corner. Washington is requiring continuous insulation. So whatever, wherever you stand on the politics of energy, the fact is they're requiring it. So what that did for us is our engineer, because of that 1-inch foam standoff, he required 3-inch edge nailing. And I'm like, but see, if the manufacturer publishes additional data, that could change. So he spec'd 3x studs. Up here, that's very rare, so it's actually more money. I wanted just to go double 2x6s at panel edges, but he wanted me to glue them and nail them in this certain pattern. I was like, if I go with 4x, it's like $1 more per piece after I get 2 out of most of them. The great thing is you almost can't miss. We still miss a couple in the field, but now you got 4x6 studs, basically every other stud, since we're framing 24 on center. So it's like, we're trying to eliminate or reduce thermal bridging, and then now because of shear, I have to put in more wood. So you're like 2 steps forward, a 1/4 step back, but that's the way it goes. But things like, for energy, we're going with a single ply LVL header. We'll take the foam cutoffs, we'll pull the zip panel off, and we'll just fill that with foam. Because of where the sheathing breaks, that should not have been 3x blocking, but the guys were using scrap. And so it's like, again, same principle. If we're trying to reduce the amount of wood in the wall because it has low thermal resistance, then why are we putting thicker wood in the wall? That's all training. It's getting everybody to understand what is it that we're working for and how do we go about it. And so, will it affect how much it costs to heat and cool this house because of those 3 blocks? No, it won't. Our climate zone is so mild. If we took an infrared camera out here at like 10 degrees, you could barely see the thermal ridging. I'm kind of more of a rationalist when it comes to this energy stuff.
So do you think that the R-sheathing is a good step? You're saying it's almost mandatory now, or it is?
It is, yeah. You'll be able to avoid continuous insulation if you go the performance route, but then you'd almost have to take an engineer's approach and you'd have to calculate every single piece in the wall assembly so that you could get to your desired.
So if you didn't want to do the R-sheathing on the outside or some sort of foam, what are your options?
Maybe spray foam in the wall cavities. Then there's climate concerns, right? Even though there are some greener spray foams. More efficient appliances. There are some very tedious ways to get around it. The easiest way is just to use the foam. And for us, the reason why I would use zip is because nothing changes on the install side except a longer nail and more nails.
So what are you nailing this on? Are you nailing on with 3 1/4, 16s?
Three's the minimum.
3s, okay.
Yeah, and we try to shoot 3 for everything.
Is it still 6 on center still, or?
3 inches on center.
3 on
this
center.
one, I really think that, like, look at this wall. There is one window in a 36-foot wall. I don't think this wall needed to be 3 on center. Our engineer, I think, if I talked to him and said, hey, we're going to be doing this house like 6 more times, then it would be worth his time at $200 an hour, right?
Yeah.
To go, okay, this wall's 3, this wall's not. It was about $1,200 and 4x6 for the whole house.
Wow.
So that plus nails, plus the panel. But personally, let's make our houses more efficient. Like, I totally buy in on if all houses in America were more efficient, we're using less energy, we're winning. Let's use less energy, right? It's just that now we're adding more and more costs, and we're already at such record high housing costs that for people who are like, it's gonna take me 20 years to pay off student loans and save for the down payment.
I think that's what a lot of people see is, okay, now we've got this elevated building cost because of the higher energy efficiency that we've got. So do you take a less efficient home for a cheaper price? Or I'm sure it's a difficult one to manage right now.
I'm not a policymaker, I'm a framer. So with Zip R, the advantage to us is we can get continuous insulation without really doing multiple trips around the house. If we were to do the wood structural panel first, which we did years ago, we had a client that they moved from Vermont, I think it was Vermont. And so it was our structural panel on the outside, then we wrapped it in 1 inches of foam, then we added furring strips for siding. That was on my very first YouTube channel, Rafter Cutter. And I would just set up my old Kodak camera, just record everything and upload it as time lapse. But it was like multiple trips. Now we're like 1 around for the wood structural panel, then we're 1 around for the foam, tape those seams, then we're 1 more around to add the rain screen, and then we're 1 more around for the siding. With this, we are 1 time around for the wood structural panel, the insulation, the weather resistant barrier, technically 1 more time for the windows, right? And then 1 time around for siding, we're done.
So are you doing a rain screen over the top of all this or no?
Don't get me started about rain. So we're doing lap siding. Since your lap siding is only touching at certain parts, the drainage efficiency of Zip is like 98%. And that test is literally a piece of plastic pressed against foam, and they put water in the top and they measure how much comes out. 98% of it comes out. With overhangs, and our walls are vertical, like today, if you looked in my story, you would see that this wall was completely wet. The sun hit it, it was dry half an hour later. Now that granted, that's not yet been covered by siding. The same thing would happen if the siding was on it. There's like an old Joe Stiebrick soundbite where he talks about reservoir cladding, and essentially 1% of the moisture hitting the wall actually gets through reservoir cladding like brick. It's not getting through LP Smart Side like that. So let's just stop it from happening to begin with. But that starts a whole nother discussion on vapor drive inside, and I'm not qualified to talk about that. Here we have decades of not using rain screens with really good success. And like you and I talked today, we've been building in this community for 20 years, the other community since 86. We live in these communities, so we know if there's problems.
So what is your reasoning for 24 on center versus 16? Because I noticed downstairs you got 16, upstairs you have 24.
We could have gone 24 downstairs, but the floor spans are so long that we had to go 16 centers with the floor.
That's an engineering thing?
It's a comfort thing. This span here is almost 20 feet long.
Okay.
And so with the kitchen island, if we can't go 24. I guess maybe we could have if we went really deep joist, but that was more just driven by the floor itself. We would be 24 everywhere. The reason is 16 on center is almost never needed structurally. So we're trying to be as rational as we can, and thankfully our engineer is really good about it. Let's take out everything that we can. There is no cripple on the end. And I can't do anything to that. And I can stand on it, right? It's not gonna move because I am stitched up with my nailing. So let's take that out and put insulation there. And if this was my personal house, if this distance to the bottom was 24, I would get rid of the cripples and just, for that one sheet, because they're not needed. The drywallers don't attach to it. So let's just put insulation in. And unless your kids come running through and kick something. So basically the short answer is let's just take out all the wood that is not needed. By definition, if it's not needed, why is it there? And let's replace it with insulation. Steve describes it as like your framing is like opaque. Your wall cavity insulation might be R21. And so people say, oh, my house insulation is R21. Yes, it is, but what is the assembly? It's not R21 because 30%, 40% of that's wood. Just trying to make good decisions and be rational where you can be. And then when you can't be, like we have to have a 4x stud, then we're like, we have a 4x stud. So to me, structure and safety of the occupant is the most important thing. Then let's address insulation. We're in earthquake country. I know that when we build, because I'm paying special attention to the earthquake stuff, I feel very confident that the people that live in our homes will be much safer than
The people that live in the ones that I build?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just like those things are like real life safety, right?
Rather than energy efficiency
Yeah.
being the primary focus.
Yeah, step one. I remember sitting through a steep rip talk years ago. It was like step one for humans was to get out of the weather. So we go into a cave or we build a roof. Step two was let's try to keep it warmer. And then when we did that kind of stuff wrong and figured out what causes moisture issues, okay, now let's get into making sure that the components work well together and the weather. Yeah, it's not, to be quite honest, I don't notice a labor savings in 24 on center. It seemed like when I order materials, it's the same. I don't know how that's possible, but it is. And it's like, we just don't save that. I think on interior walls, so many of the walls are so short that a lot of times, whether it's 24 or 16, it's almost the same number of studs in there. Because you want to make sure there's enough for the cabinet guy or whatever it might be.
We had a great trip up to Washington. We were there for a BS and beer event, which is a building science and beer event where we all go to a brewery and talk different methods of building for flashing details, air sealing, and more. While we are typically concrete framing and siding, that realm of things is a little bit outside of what we do, but it's still nice to connect with people within the industry. If you guys want information on the BS and Beer events, down in the description below, you can find quite a bit. But I had a great time hanging out with Tim and his brother Bryan, being able to talk to them about how they build, why they build the way that they do, and more. Their family has been in business for decades, and I think that's awesome. I had a great time learning about why they do 24 on center versus our traditional 16 on center, seeing them use the R-Sheathing from Huberwood, along with not installing a good bit of material. Tim is adamant about only using what it takes. So where we would normally put in a bottom cripple up against our trimmer or our jack stud, Tim will leave that out. Does it work? Absolutely. Is it different from here? 100%. It works for Tim, and it's a lot different than what we do here in California. Many years ago, Tim was the person that taught me that if I used a router to cut out my windows, not only would it be quicker, but it would be cleaner. So I'm a huge fan of sharing things like this online. So maybe if you guys see it and think, man, I could get away from 16 on center and go to 24, could be an option for you. That's a big part of why we share things here online, because you guys may see this video and think 24 on center works perfect for me. Could be your new deal. But I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, please leave a like on the video. If you have any questions, comments, drop them down below. Subscribe button's down there as well. Appreciate each and every one of you guys. We have a lot of new stuff coming out, from new projects to finishing up that big beach house to buying tools online to see just how quality they really are. There's a website called Temu that allows you to buy things for a fraction of the cost, a lot like drop shipping, and the quality is all over the place. So I went ahead and took a leap to see if anything was worth buying on these websites, and what I found was quite interesting. This little light here is amazing. I'm going to keep this in the truck at all times. But other things that we got, not so much. I'm looking forward to going over all that with you. We spent hundreds of dollars on tools from Temu to see if anything was of value, if anything actually works for the job site. What we found, you'll be surprised. See you guys next time.